Crowd scene.
So what's the movie that Steven Spielberg once said defines the taste of buttered popcorn? The clue is that in this episode, we're going back to the future to meet director Jason Aron, whose upcoming documentary film Back in Time celebrates the 30-year legacy of that definitive time travel film. Since the taping of this episode of Crowd Scene, Jason has successfully sold the rights to his film, and it's released on October 21st, 2015, the very date Marty McFly visited in the future in Back to the Future 2. So Jason shares his story with us, his tips on crowdfunding, and comments on what happened when he spoke with Michael J. Fox and creators Robert Zemeckis and Bob Gale. Jason's worked on this film for over 2 years, and like any ambitious project, it can get stressful.
You know, it's funny. I was talking to somebody randomly during the trip this week, and they said, take your time to enjoy it because there's a lot of stress at this point. It's making sure we're getting the edit done, and are we on schedule for color and sound and music? And so when you have those opportunities, when you're standing up there on stage and you're doing that panel at Comic-Con, stop, breathe, take it in, and make sure that you enjoy it, because that's the drive. I mean, that's what gives you the drive that when this is over, to get back on the horse and do it again.
Crowd scene. Gonna kick it with Pete and Mike. Crowd scene. Interviews behind the hype. Crowd scene.
Hi there.
Hello.
Welcome to Crowd Scene, the show about successful crowdfunding campaigns and the people who make them happen. I'm Michael Ogden.
And I'm Peter Dean.
In each episode of Crowd Scene, we speak with people who have taken a risk by turning an idea of theirs into reality by raising money on a crowdfunding platform. But what did it take to reach their goal? I like to hear the story behind the idea and discover what it meant for them to find success.
And I'm interested in how you design and run a successful campaign, as well as what our guests have learned along the way. We'll talk about some of the factors that can make or break a campaign.
So we're joined on the line from New York by director Jason Aron. We'll be talking about his fantastically successful Kickstarter campaign to raise funds for a real labor of love, a feature-length documentary called Back in Time about the greatest time travel trilogy of all time, Back to the Future.
So Jason and his team wanted to raise $50,000 on Kickstarter, but by the end of their campaign, they had raised 1.21 gigawatts of excitement from 2,383 backers who, between them, pledged more than $143,000.
So let's meet our guest. Welcome to the show, director Jason Aron.
Thank you so much, guys. Great to be here.
Congratulations on your campaign.
Thank you so much.
Jason, we're gonna hear all about your campaign shortly, but before that, I know Pete's got a burning question.
Yeah, we need to know, Jason, if you went back in time and met your parents, would you have been friends with them, and would they have thought you were cool?
Ooh, that's a good one. I hope so. I mean, they think I'm pretty cool now. So I guess it would still, or maybe they just think I'm cool because they're my parents. I don't know. But yeah, I probably would have been friends with both of them. I think so. Yeah. I'm very much like both of them. I inherited a lot of traits from both of my parents.
You're a good mix of the two.
Yeah, I think so.
Let's set the scene. For our listeners who aren't familiar with your project, with Back in Time, how would you describe it to someone who hasn't heard of it before?
So, I mean, the easy elevator pitch is we're looking at the 30-year, this is the 30th anniversary of the first Back to the Future movie, and we're looking at the cultural relevance of Back to the Future on our society.
And so you're going back and you're talking to all of the filmmakers, the cast members, everyone who had something to do with the film, and they're telling you their story?
Yeah, it's actually funny because unlike many of your guests, we funded this thing on Kickstarter twice.
Yes, we saw that.
So
you went back to the well.
Yeah, exactly. So we, when we started this thing over 2 years ago, we had a Kickstarter campaign, a successful Kickstarter campaign where we had raised $46,000, and the idea was really just to tell fan stories, and that's at the core of this documentary. That's who this is for and what it's about. It's about the fans that have perpetuated the love of Back to the Future for the last 30 years. And it sort of grew its own legs. And, next thing we know, instead of just interviewing fans about their stories, we're interviewing Christopher Lloyd about his involvement in the film. And then, the big day, of course, is when we interviewed Michael J. Fox and Robert Zemeckis. And by the time we kind of look back after this 2-year journey, we essentially had almost everyone from the cast and crew of Back to the Future.
Wow. Well, we want to hear all about the campaign, about the film, but curious about going back in time and hearing about that moment that the concept behind Back in Time was initially born. Can you talk us through that day of having that spark that led to your film?
Yeah, I mean it's very clear. I was standing on my toilet and then I fell off. I hit my head.
You and Doc Brown.
Exactly. No, we were. I got hired to shoot a private film, and it was a family film. They were making a bar mitzvah film, actually. And the dad had written a script, and basically the script was that he takes his son and he goes back in time, and he introduces his son to his parents, and then their parents, and just 3 generations where the son got to see what his ancestors' life was like. And for the production, they rented a DeLorean, and it was a stock DeLorean. No bells and whistles, didn't look like a time machine, but it certainly got the point across for the purposes of what they were doing, that this was sort of this dad's time machine. And the day we were filming, I was here out in Long Island where I live. We actually filmed it near my house, and I was shocked about how many people were literally stopping their cars in the middle of the street, getting out and taking pictures of the DeLorean.
Yeah.
And I was always a big Back to the Future fan growing up, and I never realized, and flash forward, and I mean, now I really realize, but I never realized how much this film affected people, and to the degree of how much it affected people. And right then and there, I said, you know what, I should make a Back to the Future documentary and just kind of look at, why people like this film so much. And I put it in the back of my head for a few months. And a very dear friend of mine, his name is Brett Culp, he crowdfunded a film called Legends of the Night, which is a film about superheroes, specifically Batman, and the strength that it gives people to, in many cases, just get through their everyday life and how they turn to Batman. And a really great inspirational story. And when I saw that he crowdfunded his film on Kickstarter, I said, you know what? We have very similar filmmaking backgrounds. We both came from event filmmaking. And if he could do this, I could do this. And
if Brett could do this, you could do it.
Exactly. And I went online and I started doing research, looking at who the purveyors of this community are, who the people are that are out there loving Back to the Future, and just trying to find cool stories.
And now, initially, was the idea that you were going to do a film about the DeLorean itself?
The core of the film never really changed. The idea was to kind of make it a little more niche, and that the specific stories that we looked at would all be dealing with the DeLorean. So the first story that we found was a father and son living out in Hubbardston, Massachusetts, which is central Massachusetts, what some might call the middle of nowhere. Not a lot of cell service out there. But that's kind of the beauty of it. You get to this place that just kind of looks like old farmland, and next thing you know, you're in this barn that they have on their property. And inside the barn, they have a screen-used time machine from Back to the Future Part 3. Today, they have the screen-used truck that Marty drove in Back to the Future's Part 2 and 3.
And do people travel all over to see these props?
Well, what's funny is that this is not a museum. It's their house. It's their own thing. I mean, they did it for themselves. And, I found this website. Of course they do. They take it to shows, and they're great raising money and awareness for the Michael J. Fox Foundation, like many others in the community do. But I found them online, and for no other reason than it was drivable. That was the story that I chose to focus on first. I mean, certainly it had a lot of, there was a lot of juice in there, and it was a great story, but the fact that it was drivable made it doable, I think, is a better way to put it. The idea here is, we wanted to crowdfund this thing. I mean, that's what I wanted to do. That was my idea from day one. I knew I needed a trailer because that's how you crowdfund. And, so I went out on a limb, went up to Hubbardston, Massachusetts. We filmed for a day and put together, the trailer that we, that eventually crowdfunded our first, campaign.
So, Jason, when you were, I saw the trailer, and it is very much, as Mike said, centered on the DeLorean. After that was funded and you started filming, at what point did you broaden your scope to the extent that you started, wondering whether you could actually start talking to Michael J. Fox and Robert Zemeckis?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's necessarily the best advice to somebody who's looking to do this, but I mean, for us, it was the whole process was very organic. Not only was it very organic, but we practically never heard the word no. Essentially, everything we wanted to do, we were eventually able to do. Interviewing Michael J. Fox was sort of never on the radar because we didn't think it would be possible. And so we didn't even attempt to go after him at first. Bob Gale, who was the writer and executive producer of all three Back to the Future movies, he had been a supporter of ours from day one. Even before we went on Kickstarter, we kind of found our way to him and kind of asked for his blessing, and he was on board with what we were doing.
And for you, though, was it a big gulp to kind of go, all right, I'm gonna pick up this phone, or I'm gonna send this email?
I definitely did it by email. If it was on the phone, it probably would have been a much bigger gulp. It was sort of a necessary evil, I guess. And it's funny because Bob's become a great a great friend. I mean, he's somebody now that I happened to have been in LA yesterday, and Bob was great with our second Kickstarter campaign. He autographed a bunch of things for us, and I needed to pick them up, and I literally sent him a text message, and I was going to run over to his house to pick them up. I mean, that's sort of the relationship that we have now. Yeah. So, I mean, certainly 2 years ago when he didn't know me from Adam, I mean, it was a much different thing.
So let's talk for a second, Jason, about the inspiration behind all of this, because I know that Mike and I are both huge fans of Back to the Future, and you clearly are. But can you remember the very first time that you saw Back to the Future? And where were you, who you were with, and how did you feel when you walked out of the theater?
Well, to completely date myself, Back to the Future came out when I was 3, so I definitely did not see it in a theater.
If you pushed out in a pram, perhaps.
Yeah, that's that one. My parents didn't bring me in a stroller Back to the Future, so.
I think I'm dating myself by asking that question.
Yeah,
I think I
saw it a few times in his teens.
Yeah, I saw it back in my 30s.
Yeah.
So for me, the first time I saw it was, I don't remember. Obviously, it was on VHS. That I know. But my first real memory of Back to the Future was a friend of mine and I. We were in 3rd or 4th grade. His name was Andrew. We loved Back to the Future. I'd practically memorized it. Mm. And I had one of those my first Sony recorders. The red recorder with the microphone on the side. Mm-hmm. And I brought it into school. And I remember sitting during recess with him and literally running back the movie line by line. I would say a line, he would say a line. I would say a line, he would say a line, and recording it onto a cassette tape. I mean, that to me is a childhood, memory.
That's a keepsake. I mean, do you still have that in your attic?
I wish I did, because I would have put it on Kickstarter for a fortune.
So do you have a favorite line from the film?
I don't have a specific favorite line. I mean, obviously there are the classics. But I think at this point, especially throughout this process, I mean, I've seen the film so many times. Yeah. For me, it's just more, it's about moments at this point. Mm-hmm. I sort of love the end of Back to the Future Part 1, where, I guess you could say that the circle closes and Marty gets to live again. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. He doesn't disappear from reality, and George gets Lorraine and the score. And I love that moment. Back to the Future Part 2, I love what the future looks like. And to me, growing up, because of my age, seeing Back to the Future Part 2 as a 10, 11-year-old kid, I mean, that vision of the future, and I'm a huge tech guy. I mean, I have everything that like Apple makes in triplicate. So seeing that and seeing hoverboards and flying cars and all that stuff, I mean, that was very big for me. And as I got older, I think I started to appreciate Back to the Future Part 1 more, but growing up, Part 2 for me was certainly my favorite movie. It was just so exciting, and alternate timelines and all that stuff. But
also, living in 2015 has got to be a crushing disappointment without the hoverboard. Well, actually, the Hendo hoverboard. We'll get to that.
Well, but, yeah. I mean, I'm the only one on this call who has ridden a hoverboard.
That is true. Looking into your story, seeing some interviews with the Hendo hoverboard, the husband and wife, have to remind me of their names.
Greg and Jill.
Yeah, they seem like lovely people. And there's a great quote that Greg says. Okay, here it is. So Greg Henderson of the Hendo hoverboard says, "What we found is when you're doing things for the right reasons, not worried about fame or fortune, but doing some actual good, there's a lot of power that comes with that, and that's what we focused on."
Yeah, I mean, first of all, he is one of the most salt of the earth. Both of them, Greg and Jill, most salt of the earth people you'll ever meet. Mm. They were amazing to interview. Greg happens to be a genius. He thinks on a wavelength that we just don't. And listen, I was good at science. I did very well in high school chemistry and stuff like that. But we happened to be animating a section of the film where Greg talks about the epiphany of creating the hoverboard. And I had a conference call last week with Greg and the animator. Mm-hmm. And I had no clue what he was talking about.
Gigawatts, this and Gigawatts.
Yeah, I mean, and it's funny because he's one of those guys where he's trying so hard to explain it to you in only a way that he can understand it.
Yeah.
And you're just going, yeah, no, Greg, no.
It's
no.
a real life Doc Brown.
I mean, that's it.
Yeah.
That's it.
Now I want to ask you, you've got 3 kids, is that right?
Yes.
Any of them named Marty?
None of them named Marty. Today's one of their birthdays, though.
Hey, happy birthday.
Yeah, her name is JJ.
Hey, happy birthday, JJ.
Yeah.
How old is JJ?
3.
So JJ has not seen Back to the Future. Have any of your kids seen Back to the Future?
Yes, my oldest son is 8, and he has seen it many, 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 many times. And not because I rammed it down his throat. I mean, he knows what I'm doing, and he's going into 4th grade, so he's old enough to kind of get what's going on.
Yeah.
But he kind of took it on himself to watch it, and last summer, I think it was Stars had it on demand, and he was just watching it over and over and over and over, and just wouldn't stop. Probably because it's like the only adult thing that I ever let him watch, and so
Well, you've seen the film 100 times, so the research says.
Could be more, but yeah, I'll put that as a minimum.
I've got 2 questions about that. Number 1, are you sick of the song "As Great as It Is, the Power of Love"?
No, because it is that great.
It is.
Okay, good. And
I have to say that I'm interviewing Huey Lewis next week.
Oh, fantastic!
You preempted one of our questions.
So, having seen it 100 times, you obviously know it deeply. But in the course of making Back in Time your film, is there something you found out about Back to the Future that you didn't know before?
Yes. So this is a cool story. We actually had a panel at the Tribeca Film Festival, and they gave us a half-hour panel at a Back to the Future screening. So we were on stage, they showed our trailer, and then there were about 1,000 people in the audience, which was really cool. And then we got to watch Back to the Future. So what was great is that this was my first time seeing Back to the Future in a theater with other people, although I had seen it in England at Secret Cinema with 3,000 people a night 3 times. But this was very different. Because you were in a theater, it was screening very high quality on a screen, and you got to pick out a lot of the nuances, and the audience reactions were great. I mean, there were things about the timing of the jokes that watching it alone, I didn't get. Some looks that Christopher Lloyd gave as Doc Brown, just the comedic timing of them was perfect, and there were laughs that as a collective audience you laughed, but as an individual, I'd never felt that.
There are a lot of great visual gags, throughout that film. And
yeah, absolutely.
I think some of the love that the audience feels for Back to the Future is partly out of that kind of attention to detail that the filmmakers gave it,
and both Bob Gale and Robert Zemeckis kind of said in their interviews, and not a direct quote, but essentially that they wrote their movies for the people that were going to go see them 2 and 3 times. The sight gag, the most popular sight gag from Back to the Future, the one that most people know about is, the mall that Marty goes to is called the Twin Pines.
Yeah.
And he goes back in time, and when he comes back to the future at the end of the movie, and he runs up to the mall at the scene where Doc's getting shot. For anyone who hasn't seen it, I apologize for giving it away.
There's no one left who hasn't seen it.
Yeah, exactly. So the mall is then called the Lone Pines Mall, and of course, what had happened was Marty goes back to 1955, and he's on Peabody's ranch, the Twin Pines Ranch, and he, as he's driving away being shot at, he runs over a pine tree and knocks it down. So instead of Twin Pines Mall, it is now the Lone Pine Mall. And there are other gags like that. For example, the opening shot of the clock tower, the ledge is in perfect condition, but when Marty comes back, the clock tower snapped. There's a piece missing from it, and that's the piece of the ledge that Doc Brown had knocked down.
I had not picked up on that.
Again now.
Yes.
See,
well, can I ask you? I mean, Back to the Future. It feels. I mean, it's particularly American. Yet you've been covered from as far as Korea in the press, and your campaign. You of course had backers from all over the place. I mean, do different cultures interpret Back to the Future differently?
I think my best sort of interaction to answer that question was with Fabian Riggle, who's the director of Secret Cinema. And I asked him that question. I said, here we are, I'm thousands of miles from home in London, and you're doing this thing, and 80,000 people are coming to participate in this Back to the Future thing for a movie that takes place in California. Why? And he gave a very interesting answer. And he said that, as somebody living in London, people living in England, we look at those sort of American values, and we kind of want that. There's like a desire for that, and it's really cool. That to him was sort of the first answer, and the first time I said, wow, so people kind of want these American values. I haven't really asked the question from anybody from other cultures, but I can only imagine that that's sort of the simplicity of the movie. It's
how do you think the film went down in Libya?
Yeah, probably not so popular.
Yeah, all right. Well, look, we're going to talk about the crowdfunding campaign in just a second, and I think we could talk about Back to the Future all day. I just want to ask you, Jason, did you have to give up anything to make this movie? Did you have to put anything else on hold, or?
I don't think I had to put anything else on hold. What I will say that I had to do is work that much harder, because when you crowdfund something, obviously the crowdfunding is what paid for the film, and it's great doing a podcast with you guys who can kind of your audience is kind of looking for this, but the crowdfunding paid for the actual production cost of the film. But I didn't get paid over the course of the last 2 years to make this film.
Right.
So essentially, because eating was somewhat of a priority in the last 2 years, my work schedule outside of this film didn't really slow down. So what it's kind of meant is many work days that have 20 plus hours in them. I'm talking to you on the back end of spending the last 2 nights on an airplane, driving to Boston, flying to LA and back in about a 48-hour period. So just to get the last number of interviews done. So that's kind of what I've had to do because of it. But I wouldn't trade it for anything. So
okay, let's get on to the crowdfunding campaign. So just to be clear, why did you decide to crowdfund your film, Jason?
I didn't know another way. I had sort of been very, I happen to be a very active on Kickstarter. I've backed about 15 or 20 projects myself. A lot of them actually in the tech space, but I kind of knew it was out there and I knew it existed. And, there were traditional ways of funding this. I could have tried to go to people that do that or gone to an investor, but I didn't want to give up too much up front, especially not really having enough experience in it to know what the right numbers were for that. That was a big part of it. And the other thing is, because we were making a fan film for the fans, we figured, all right, we should crowdfund this, because if the fans actually want to see this, then this will work. I mean, this will be the way to do it.
So you were making the film with some friends of yours, right?
Correct. So Louis Krubich, who is he's not only a friend, but he's somebody who I work with very closely on basically all my other commercial production projects. He signed on to executive produce this project from day one. And Lee Leshin, who's become a very good friend, was somebody that I did not know when we started this project, but he contacted us after our first Kickstarter campaign and has become our producer and has taken control of that and done an amazing job throughout the last, year plus at this point.
Did your friends need much convincing to jump on board?
No, really, Louis was the guy I had to convince. And I called another friend, Greg Lassick, who he was a huge Back to the Future fan and also a filmmaker. So I called him and asked him to kind of be involved in the beginning Kickstarter process. He was excited to do it, loving Back to the Future. And for Louis, he thought it was a great opportunity. And he's the one that kind of said to me, let's not go to our friends and family and ask for money. Let's do this on Kickstarter, because I think the world wants to see this thing.
Sorry, why did you choose Kickstarter instead of Indiegogo or maybe Seed and Spark, which is a film-focused crowdfunding platform?
Having the name recognition of Kickstarter, sort of the industry leader on this, we were going for Back to the Future fans, not people that like to crowdfund things. Certainly people like to crowdfund things, great. But we wanted the Back to the Future fan who might have never crowdfunded anything before. So we wanted to make sure that name recognition was there and that we had the opportunity to kind of make sure we get every donation that's sort of on the table. And I think one of the major benefits of Indiegogo, obviously, is that you're able to keep the money if you don't reach your goal. We set our initial goal lower than we thought we actually needed. And it turned out to be vastly lower than what we actually needed to complete this project. So there was sort of this mathematical mind game that we were trying to play with our original Kickstarter goal anyway. So that we kind of made that concern non-existent as well. Realistically, looking back, we should have made our first goal 50,000 as well.
You mentioned you wanted to reach the Back to the Future fans who might not necessarily have crowdfunded. How did you go about finding them, reaching them? I mean, were you working on building your mailing list before you launched your campaign?
We kind of used the reach of the Back to the Future community. So I mentioned Joe Walzer before. He was the guy that headed up the restoration of the time machine that lives at Universal Studios Hollywood. He had a Facebook page for the time machine restoration that had about 60,000 followers. So that was a big one. And he was in touch with the person that runs the Back to the Future Facebook page. It has 2.7 million likes on it. Wow. So that's a real number.
Yeah.
And he couldn't make any promises for the guy that runs that page, but he had been in touch with him. He asked him to post about us, and he did. So those were really the two big ways that we just kind of jumped in front of the Back to the Future community. And Stephen Clark, who runs backtothefuture.com and all of its social media channels, Facebook and Twitter, he was also a big supporter of ours, and he posted about it. So those three avenues were sort of our tap into the Back to the Future world. And Bill Shea, who was prominently featured in our original trailer, was a huge supporter of us, and through his own business, which has nothing to do with Back to the Future, offered incentives to his buyers to get involved with this documentary. So those were sort of the big ways. And then the internet took over. Just different media channels who wrote about us, SciO9 and Slash Film's been a huge supporter of ours. And I'm just talking about the first campaign. I mean, the second campaign, to fast forward, seems like every media outlet that's out there did a story on us, which was amazing.
Was there something in particular that you put together, say, a pitch or a press release or that caught the attention?
Yeah, we had a formal press release that we did send out, and we made available through Facebook and our website at the time. But beyond that, it was just kind of communicating with these people that I mentioned, saying, hey, just plug our Kickstarter link,
Yeah. And did you have to kind of prove your own cred in terms of as a Back to the Future fan? Did those guys, give you a quick quiz to make sure that you passed the test?
I think once they saw the trailer, they kind of got it. And Joe Walzer specifically, who is, one of the mega Back to the Future fans on the planet, he told me long after, we're very close now. He told me long after the first Kickstarter, said, when I saw your first Kickstarter trailer, I knew it wasn't done. I knew that that's not what your film was going to be, but I saw from the quality of it, the way it was shot and how it was edited and the angle that you took, I knew what it could be. And that's, and that's sort of what sold him on it.
So you did take a leap of faith though, by making this, the short video before you found some of these major connectors.
A lot of it was sort of concurrent, where we said, hey, this is what we want to do. Can we get your support? Yes. All right. When it comes out, we'll shout it out. So, there was a sort of a lot of things happening because, from the time that we shot shot, not edited, from the time that we started rolling camera until the time we were on Kickstarter was about 45 days. So, relatively quick.
I've noticed in some of the behind the scenes films that you made as you were going along, you name a sponsor that you picked up along the way. I think it's Lens Pro to Go. How did you pick them up, and what role did they play in making the movie?
So they were a gear sponsor for us, and it was literally as easy as writing an email. Hey, we're making a Back to the Future documentary. We need some lenses and stuff. Can you help? It was literally that easy.
I love that. That's great.
Yeah, and that's definitely advice to take away. Just ask. I think that advice really speaks to almost every facet of our Kickstarter. Not even our Kickstarter, just the journey of making this documentary in general. Every person that we eventually went to, like I said, except for Tom Wilson, who played Biff, said yes to us. Whether it was asking for a gear sponsorship, whether it was asking for an interview with Michael J. Fox, whether it was asking, the editor that made our second trailer, the one that features all the people from the movie, the one that accompanied our second Kickstarter campaign. That was somebody that in a million years I didn't think we'd be able to afford. And he ended up working with us and did an amazing job on that trailer, but just had to ask. I think a lot of times people have a lot of hesitation. It's, I can't ask for that. Oh, it'll definitely be no. We said, you know what? We're just going to ask. We're just going to put it out there, and it's all been positive because of that.
I imagine that each yes kind of gave you a little bit more confidence to kind of keep going a little bit deeper into the rabbit hole.
Yeah, absolutely. And then because of what the yeses were, when the yes was an interview of Robert Zemeckis, it's like, wow, this documentary just got so much more real and so much more. And that much bigger, and so it was great.
When Biff Tan and Tom F. Wilson said no, did he use the word butthead?
He did not. And it's ironic because I almost didn't take my own advice with Biff, and I'm glad I did in the end. I had been told from the get-go that he's not going to do it. And I had been told that from two very reliable sources that he doesn't do Back to the Future anymore. No matter how big or small this project is, he's not going to do it. And I was fine with that. To me, that was done. I'm not even going to ask. And Lee, our producer Lee, I give him all the credit in the world. He said, if we don't ask, I'll never be able to sleep at night for the rest of my life. So I said, Lee, all the power to you. And he wrote this phenomenal email that was sincere and funny and had everything in it. And he sent this email. It was about, a couple paragraphs. And within minutes, we got a response from Tom, and he said, no, thank you. That was the response.
So he was quick on the reply.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
We know he got it.
So, Jason, I just want to ask, the first campaign you were asking for, I believe, was it $35,000? 33 and a bit. And the second campaign, it was $50,000. So in the second campaign, where did that figure come from? Was $50,000 enough?
Probably not, but there were two completely different mentalities when we went into Kickstarter both times. The first time was a prayer. I mean, we had no clue what was going to happen. We shot a video in a day. I tell people it's almost like it was like smoke and mirrors, I mean, we had nothing. We had an idea that we wanted to do 2 years from now, So it's amazing that we raised the money. But because of the success of that, when we went back to the Kickstarter the second time this year, we knew that it would get funded, because if we got funded the first time, how could we not get funded now? We're staring down the, October of this year. We now have Michael J. Fox and Christopher Lloyd and Robert Zemeckis all in this amazing trailer that we got cut by one of Hollywood's, most in-demand trailer editors. So of course we're going to get funded. I find that Kickstarter is a numbers game. With technology stuff, it doesn't matter what your goal is, because once a project catches fire, it could just exponentially go into the millions. With creative projects, I find that once you reach your goal, the donations slow down tremendously. I don't know if that's proven science. It's just something I certainly saw twice with my own campaign. I've seen it with others. So I certainly had that feeling going in. I could have asked for 75, maybe. I never thought in a million years that we were going to get $143,000 and that we would get the $50,000 in less than 3 days.
So Jason, right before you went live with your Kickstarter campaign, can you put us in the room? Did you have any concerns at that moment?
Honestly, there's a project called Out of Time. It's a great project. It's a documentary about the restoration of the time machine that we talked about earlier. I knew that they were going to go live the same day we did. I knew it in advance.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a very scary thing, because Joe Walser is a big part of our documentary, is the guy that is prominently featured in their documentary, and Steve Concatelli, their filmmaker, I spoke with, very nice guy. In fact, I donated to their campaign.
You helped them get across the line.
I helped them when they were already across the line, but and they only had a $25,000 goal, and they reached it in just over a day. So It was a very scary thing, thinking that, oh my God, there's going to be two Back to the Future documentaries at the same time.
Yeah.
They're going to steal our thunder, and we're not going to raise any money. And what was even worse was that we had an issue with a release that we both kind of went into it saying, all right, on Monday, we're both launching our campaigns. Good luck, not in a negative way, just good luck to you. And let's hope that we both make our goals.
But I guess you felt that was the window. You couldn't delay it any further. You had to get in there.
It's funny because we found out by accident. I was on the phone with Joe the week before, and I said, oh, by the way, just to let you know, we're launching our second Kickstarter on Monday, if you could post about it on your website. And there was this moment of silence, of deafening silence. He said, wait, you guys are launching a Kickstarter on Monday? Yeah. Well, Steve's launching his Kickstarter on Monday. Uh-oh. And then many, many phone calls ensued, and we actually asked Bob Gale what he thinks that we should do, and Bob said, don't worry, the Back to the Future well is deep.
I love it.
Wise words.
And he was, I mean, listen, if anybody knows, he does. And it was a very scary thing. And like I said, because we ended up having to delay our launch till Monday night at about 7 or 8 p.m. East Coast time. They had been live already since midnight Monday morning. And they had raised almost $20,000 before we ever went live.
That must have been slightly painful to watch.
And because now it was like, oh my God, these guys have gone viral. Nobody's going to donate to us.
Did you change your plan at all at that moment?
Couldn't. I mean, we were locked in. It was just, it is what it is. I mean, I was just emailing Lee and texting him every 5 seconds saying, where's the release? Where's the release? We need the permission. We got to go live. Let's go. And he's like, put your phone down, take a walk around the block, calm down. It was a very stressful day. And then, I mean, we raised $6,000 in the first like 10 minutes of the campaign. It was crazy because what we did is we went back to our original backers, the 600 plus backers, and said, we're live again. And we sent out that as an update to our first campaign. So we had that instant access to people that had already given us money. And some of our higher level stuff went right away. The Michael J. Fox, Christopher Lloyd signed DeLorean Lego set. I mean, that was $1,000 reward that went in the first minute of the Kickstarter, partly because it was a friend of mine, so he might have been tipped off a little bit to the fact that we were going live. I didn't know he was going to buy it though. That was a surprise to me. But it's funny because a few people said, "Oh, I really wanted that," and it's ironic that a friend of mine who knew that we were going live just kind of jumped on it. So it was pretty funny. But
I bet there were a couple things that you were kind of sad to part with that you were hoping to keep in your own house.
I'll be completely honest. Many of the things that went out, I made sure to get duplicates of.
For your third campaign.
Yeah. Well, so, the Sign Back to the Future script, I have one of those. Right. And the Alan Silvestri signed sheet music. I'm a musician myself, so that was big for me. Alan and I are also we grew up in the same town. So I wanted to make sure I had one of those. And the biggest thing was Michael J. Fox and Christopher Lloyd signed the actual license plate, the Back in Time license plate that is on our movie poster. So the movie poster was an actual image that was taken by Mike Duvall, actually from Lens Pro to Go. He came out one night and we did that shot. It took us about 3 hours to get the smoke and the lighting and how we were going to do it. And I had that license plate made up Back in Time, and we put it on Bill Shea's DeLorean. And when we were done with the shot, I took the license plate and Michael and Chris signed it, and I was going to auction that off as sort of the creme de la creme of Kickstarter awards. Mm-hmm. And I brought it back into my production office and I had it on my desk. And I took one look at it and I said, "This is not ever leaving here." It's not.
It's too good.
Yeah.
It's too one of a kind. I mean, it's like the, it's the one piece from the production of this that I cannot let go.
Yeah.
And I did not put it on Kickstarter.
And one day JJ will have that.
Exactly.
I
I actually just had it framed, so it'll be up on my wall shortly.
Okay, Jason, we're going to take a short break here. When we come back, we're going to be talking a little bit more about the campaign.
Perfect.
Hi, everybody. If you run a successful crowdfunding campaign on any platform and would like to share your story on this show, please get in touch with me and Pete at hello@crowdsceneshow.com. You can find more information about this episode on crowdsceneshow.com. And if you're into social media, follow us on Facebook and Twitter at crowdsceneshow. If you like this podcast, be sure and subscribe, and please share it with friends however you can. And a review on iTunes helps us a lot too. Thanks. So we're back, and it's the year 2015, and we're talking with director Jason Aron about his kickstarted film, Back in Time. So Jason, can you describe the moment when you realized the campaign was going to be successful?
The first one or the second one?
The second one.
The second one was pretty easy.
Okay, the first one.
No, I mean, listen, the second one, it happened so fast. It happened in a 3-day period. And it was just kind of, okay, well, we're good now.
Right.
The fun part was wondering how far I could go, With the first one, it was a very nail-biting experience.
No sleep.
Yeah, well, first of all, I didn't know how many days to do. I wasn't sure. Kickstarter recommends that you do 30 days. And I said, screw Kickstarter. I don't care what you think. I'm doing 45. I just figured that it would be the perfect amount of time to kind of get the project out into the public, get people to know about it, and then pounce, As a great piece of advice, wrong. There's no sense of urgency. And the media did a great job of getting our project out there so people knew about it. We didn't need this saturation period. And then what ended up happening is that the donations had come in right away, just like in our second campaign, but not to the same extent. And then there was a lull. I mean, a very long lull where we started getting nervous. We didn't think we were going to get there. What ended up happening is we picked up an executive producer, Akram Sheikh, who he ended up coming in a big way, very high dollar amount, and had kind of pushed us out of the teens into the mid-20s. That was it.
Thank goodness he showed up.
Once we were in the mid-20s, we said, all right, we're going to get there. And we said, if we're a little bit short, we'll find at that point, I don't want to say a private investor, basically somebody who could kind of push us over the top, with the understanding that maybe we'd have to do some type of an equity deal or whatever, which we never had to do because we got there. Another thing that I didn't know is that with Kickstarter, the last 48 hours are huge, because anybody that hits the remind me button, or remind me later, they get an email notification from Kickstarter exactly 48 hours for the end of your campaign. So we raised over $10,000 in the last 2 days, which percentage wise for that first campaign was a very big number. And we just didn't know that was going to happen.
During that lull and that panic started to set in, did you do anything to G up that support? Did you come up with a new plan?
There wasn't much we could do. I felt a little bit sort of, trapped. Like, it's like, let's find more promotion. Well, where? We've tapped the well so many times,
Where did the money come from when you started getting support? Was it all from the US and maybe from the UK? Were you surprised by where it came from?
That's a great question. Back to the Future is global. I am monetary proof that Back to the Future is global, because especially with the second campaign, with a couple thousand backers, where you can really kind of get a feel for where the money is coming from. I mean, we have backers from every country under the sun. It's all over Europe and Asia and UK, US. I mean, the backers are from everywhere. And even if it's not financial support, like you guys had seen, I have done interviews in South Korea, in Brazil, just all over the place. And that's really a testament to Back to the Future's, global reach.
Yeah, the well is deep and wide.
Bob Gale's right. Yeah.
Bob Gale's great words.
Well, you mentioned that there was another campaign going live at that same time, and there have been other Back to the Future documentaries, but something about yours was particularly attractive to lots of people. What do you think that is?
I think our documentary, and I mean this completely positively, is a mainstream thing. We're not looking at anything too specifically, which is ironic, because originally we were kind of looking at these stories relating to the DeLorean. But we're taking a very mainstream approach, trying to appeal to literally somebody that may have just seen Back to the Future once. And that's always been our target audience. And I think that's kind of what works. And that's what works about Back to the Future. How it's so simple and it has so many, thematic elements and all that stuff.
Okay, 2 quick fire questions. Best day of your campaign, toughest day of your campaign.
First day, best day, for sure. I had never made that much money in a day, ever, doing anything. And the toughest day, I don't know what number it is, but it had to be somewhere around 11 or 12 when the $4,000 to $5,000 a day that we were making started tapering off. Like I said, during the first campaign, that lull was a very real thing, that we just went through days of not making much money, and we got used to it. With the second campaign, we were making so much money every day that, there was this hope that it would never stop. And, when you go to the Kickstarter grid and you see like, we made $1,100 today, it's like, all right, well, we're going to have a lull with this campaign too. And we did, but it was just, with everything being magnified, the lulls it was still 4-digit dollar days. So I think that first day when we realized, we're not going to, because we I looked on KickTracks, of course, to kind of track the progress. And while that's an interesting website, their future predictions don't work very well. Because up front, they were saying we were going to make $400,000 to $500,000 on this campaign based on how viral it had gone in the beginning.
Right.
But, that was a reality that I knew would never come. And sadly, it didn't. So
during this lull, which was obviously a low point for you, what did you do to keep your spirits up?
What was great is that we had all these great media appearances at shows like yours that we kept getting invited to, and it was great. So we got to. What's been fun about this, we've already done WonderCon. We've already done C2E2 in Chicago. We had the Tribeca panel that I told you about. And we're doing Comic-Con San Diego, which is the creme de la creme of Comic-Cons, of course. And we're going to be appearing at the London Film and Comic-Con. So we've been able to promote this film even before it's done. And that's a little bit backwards. Obviously, when you crowdfund the film, it's a different experience than, usually when you make especially a documentary, nobody knows about it until it's done, until you're ready to show it. We've had the opportunity to sort of be out in front of the public throughout the making and time of this documentary. And it's been really cool.
So in some ways, you're kind of that energy that you're getting back from the fans must kind of keep you rolling.
Yeah, no question, especially over a 2-year period of just plugging away at this thing. And like I said, I'm not getting paid,
Yeah.
a salary to do this. So it's hard when, my personality, I'm a perfectionist and I want every interview to be perfect. And I've reshot things during this documentary because I didn't like them. There's been no settling, but to keep that desire and that drive going, it sort of takes that, it takes knowing that other people are excited about it to continue to do that.
Who are your biggest supporters, both emotionally and financially? I noticed that you did have some backers at the $5,000 level on your second campaign.
Yeah, I mean, we had.
Did you know those people?
No, they're all complete strangers. In fact, the two during our first campaign, we had a $4,000 and a $9,000 backer, and those were also complete strangers to us. They're not anymore. But like I said, Akram Sheikh, who's an executive producer, Ron Ferguson, also an executive producer from the first campaign. I mean, I give them a lot of credit. They donated a lot of money to something that was very far away and very unknown. During the second campaign, we had the three $5,000 backers. There were also two backers that purchased an opportunity to go be extras on the Goldbergs, the ABC show The Goldbergs. And of course, Adam F. Goldberg has been a huge supporter of ours. And that was a $4,500 opportunity. So they certainly came in a big way, and they're going to get something really cool and fun out of it for them. But they're big supporters. I mean, as far as emotionally, I mean, my family, my wife, who's let me do this for 2 years. That's a big deal. I have one of my production partners for my events business, who kind of has picked up a lot of slack that I left behind with the documentary over 2 years. That's big stuff.
So before we get to sharing your crowdfunding tips, Jason, I want to ask, besides Doc Brown and Marty McFly, can you talk about who inspires you to do what you do?
I've always loved cinema. I've always loved movie making, Hollywood. I don't know if I don't have any specific, I listen, the movies that I like. I mean, I love a million Zemeckis movies. So certainly he's a director that I look at and say, wow, especially having the opportunity to meet him and interview him. I mean, his understanding of this is amazing. But I think what's cool is, I get to meet in my regular work so many different people, and we do so many different types of projects outside of this. I mean, meeting Dan Harmon, I had never watched Community, so he wasn't somebody that was on my radar at all. And he is very heavily featured in our film because of how smart he is and how well he understands cinema and film, and the way that he's able to
and story structure.
Yeah, and the way that he's able to talk about it.
Yeah.
His analogies. It's amazing, and that, to me, getting to experience that as myself a filmmaker becomes very motivational. So, did you
talk story structure with Bob Zemeckis and Dan Harmon?
Dan Harmon, yes. Bob Zemeckis, not so much. We spent more time with him on big picture things.
Yeah. Well, Dan Harmon's so articulate and so bright about explaining how to break that down.
I mean, absolutely. And I mean, we interviewed the guy at like 8:00 in the morning. He just kind of rolled in and was ready to go.
When you're looking to structure your own documentary film, are you thinking about Dan Harmon at all?
I mean, he came towards the end, so not really. But, it's interesting because then kind of looking back and now that we are in post-production, the way he describes arc and story and stuff like that, I mean, it's big. I think what's been great about our story is that a lot of it's built itself. And part of the reason that we're still on the road shooting interviews is because once we went into post-production, it's kind of like when we took, my editor, Tom, I give him a lot of credit because I kind of threw all the ingredients at him. Imagine you're making a soup and the soup needs 10 ingredients. Well, I threw 50 ingredients at him and said, all right, now make the soup. So I gave him intentionally a lot of creative license to decide where the story was going to go. First of all, he has feature documentary experience in terms of editing, and I was way too close to the project. I mean, I've become very close with a lot of the people in it. So it's very hard. Look, at the end of the day, I'm going to make the final cut, but to have another set of eyes on this, somebody who hasn't been around throughout production, to say, listen, this just isn't as potent as this, was very important in post.
Well, one of the challenges you've got with a film like Back in Time, you've interviewed the cast, the filmmakers, everybody, but they have all told their stories many times over the past 30 years. How do you get a fresh and surprising answers out of them for your film? What's your technique?
I think what makes me good at what I do specifically is the fact that I look for what would interest me. And I think I kind of have that sort of Joe Public, view of movies. I happen to be a big action movie fan, for example. There isn't an action movie that you could make that I would think was bad. I mean, it would be so difficult.
Could give it a go.
Yeah,
I'm trying to think of one.
Yeah.
And superhero movies, for example. I love superhero movies. Every single one that's ever been made.
Spider-Man 3?
I was about to say, I even like The Amazing Spider-Man 2.
How about you? Did you like Teen Wolf?
Well,
because that was disappointing after the Back to the Future, wasn't it?
I mean, listen, it's Michael, but I mean, The Amazing Spider-Man 2 was the worst superhero movie ever. I mean, it made Spider-Man 3 look like Citizen Kane, but I liked it. I enjoyed it. I think I've even seen it more than once.
I think I'm with you on this. I don't mind a bad superhero movie or
yeah. So for me, I love watching shows like MTV Cribs, just seeing how people live.
So they're relating to you as a fan. So they see that you're not there to ambush them, that you want to hear their stories.
Oh, for sure. I mean, certainly with this documentary, I mean, this is a love letter to Back to the Future. Everybody knew when they were being interviewed that this was not gotcha journalism.
But is it tough to kind of get a story that they haven't told before?
I got a lot of stories that I had never heard before. So I wonder how many other people have. And I think that's what's important about this documentary. Will the hardcore Back to the Future fan enjoy it? I think the hardcore Back to the Future fan would enjoy anything that came out Back to the Future. So I'm not worried about those people.
Mm-hmm.
The people I'm worried about are sort of the general public. Are they going to want to see this documentary? The masses. And I heard a story yesterday from Frank Price, who is a studio executive at Paramount and Universal.
Mm-hmm.
He's the guy that greenlit the writing of Back to the Future while at Paramount and the studio head at Universal when Back to the Future got made. He told me a story yesterday. I'm not repeating it. I have never heard it. I've never seen it. It's 1,000,000% going in my documentary. and I can say this. If it has been told before, when 90+% of the audience sees our movie Back in Time, they will have never heard it. I know that. Michael J. Fox told a phenomenal story about the London premiere with Princess Diana of Back to the Future that's in the documentary. 90% of the people will not have heard it. Is there going to be did he tell the story at some panel that he did 20 years ago and 300 people were in the room? Maybe.
Right.
I didn't hear it. So,
For these guys, for Michael J. Fox, you've got a limited time to talk to them. I mean, do you have an opening question that you have prepared?
Yes. My opening question for every interview is, please state your name and your role in the Back to the Future community.
Nice.
That is the opening question.
Start with an easy one.
Yeah.
Yeah, I always tell people, I say, all right, guys, this is going to be a layup. I need your name and your role in the Back to the Future community.
That's great. And
then it's really, it's funny because early on in the documentary, I went in with written questions. I had my phone in my hand. I could honestly say that I have not prepped for an interview for this documentary over the last 15 interviews.
Mm-hmm.
I'm so dialed in on what we're doing and where we are and where the edit is and what I need from the people that we're interviewing that I go in completely cold. I know the people's stories and I'm able to do the interviews like that. And it's very natural. Very natural.
So you're very present and listening to them as they speak.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's funny because Christopher Lloyd was one of the ones. First of all, we did Slash Film, slashfilm.com, who's been a very big supporter of our documentary. We did sort of I don't want to call it a contest, but we did a thing with them where we allowed their readers to submit questions for Christopher Lloyd.
Excellent.
Which was really fun.
And he seems a pretty elusive character.
Yeah. It's interesting because he's kind of out there, but not Doc Brown out there. He's Christopher Lloyd out there. It's a very different thing. But we allowed them to ask questions. So I went in with the longest written list of questions because I had these questions from the Slash Film readers. And then, of course, we had our own. And this is Christopher Lloyd. I don't want to leave anything out.
Yeah.
We interviewed him. He was by far the biggest guy. So I didn't ask him. I probably had 40 questions. I probably didn't ask him 30 questions that I went in with, and Michael J. Fox, he gave us we knew that we had the shortest amount of time with him. I believe they gave us either 35 or 45 minutes. And a lot of it was with his help. I mean, it's very hard for him to sit for that long.
Right.
Because the truth is, after we interviewed him, we talked to him for almost an hour when he was able to kind of get up and move around and whatever, just talking about hockey and all this different stuff.
Yeah.
And with him, because I knew that there was a time constraint, I wanted to make sure we got the right questions out of him, the stuff that we really wanted to fill in the holes.
Exactly.
And I ran out of questions. 25 minutes into the interview, I'm done. And I'm going, all right, well, it's Michael J. Fox. I'm not stopping the camera. So then I just, then I just started going off the top of my head, see where the conversation went. And that's what was great. It's like when you take those standardized tests in high school, like your biggest fear is that you run out of time.
Yeah.
So we never had that in any interview. And very few people, even Robert Zemeckis. I mean, we only had a half hour with him. He was literally in the middle of post-production on a feature film.
Mm-hmm.
So we knew very limited time there. But even with him, I didn't really go in with that list of questions, like a hard list.
Mm-hmm.
I knew there were certain things we wanted to ask him and then just kind of saw where the conversation went. And that's what's cool. There's so many things in this documentary that I would have never dreamed of and didn't plan for, which is kind of how it should be.
Yeah.
I find a lot of times with documentaries, they're not documentaries, they're agendas.
Did you have a documentary that you kind of looked to as particular inspiration?
Not really. And the truth is, prior to me doing this, I'm not like I know people that are huge documentary fans. I mean, you could show them a documentary about grass growing and they'd watch it and think it was like the most interesting thing.
So your approach to making the documentary and not preparing questions is very similar to our approach here on the show.
There we go.
We never write questions down, do we, Mike?
I've got 15 pages of notes in front of me, Pete.
And Mike, that's not your line. Check the script.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
No, Pete.
Yeah.
I mean, for me, listen, I like, that's the thing for me too. And again, I think it goes back to this sort of like general public attitude that I have. Documentary has to be great for me to watch it, or else it's not going to capture my attention. I have so little time as is for,
You're watching all those action films.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, who has time to watch a good documentary when you're watching The Amazing Spider-Man 2?
Yeah, exactly. So, Jason, if you could go back in time, what advice would you give yourself if you could start this project again?
Don't do it. No. I just wish there's knowledge. I wish I could have given myself a knowledge base, an understanding of how the crowdfunding arc works, when the money's going to come in. Listen, we successfully crowdfunded 2 campaigns, so it's not like we did it all wrong. We had to do a number of things right to kind of get to where we are. And I'll be the first one to admit it was dumb luck. No question about it, because we had no experience with it. I didn't hire a crowdfunding expert to guide us through the trenches. So there was a major dumb luck element to it. But we did a lot of things right. I just wish I knew more, So
Jason, you've run a successful campaign. What advice do you have for our listeners who would like to start their own campaign? Can you give us your tips for crowdfunding success?
Yeah, a lot of it has to do with rewards. The first thing is that you got to make sure you're pricing your rewards right. I've seen a lot of Kickstarter campaigns fail because just at the end of the day, there is there's a transaction here. There's a consumer, and they're giving their money towards something. And yes, they're supporting whatever project you're doing. And specifically with us, it's a film. I mean, they're supporting a film. But they're getting something back for it, and you got to make sure that the money makes sense, the finances make sense. You can't charge $150 for a T-shirt because at the end of the day, people see through that. I mean, you're just trying to gouge them for money. But at the same time, you can't charge them $11.99 for a T-shirt, what they'd pay at Target, because no, I mean, this person is crowdfunding your campaign. If I have to spend every dollar on making that T-shirt, then I'm not going to have enough money to do my campaign. So finding that right balance, I think, is very important. The most common rewards for us was that $25 DVD, that $50 Blu-ray, and the $50 T-shirt. Oh, and the digital download. The digital download, we charge $12 for it, and it gets people to film. And obviously, it doesn't cost us any money to fulfill that reward. It's an email link.
I backed your campaign at that level, I think.
Yeah. So I mean, that's listen. If you're doing a film, you got to have a digital download. It's sort of a must. But at the same time, you have to make sure that you have some higher level stuff in there, because it's very hard to get to $143,000, $12 at a time.
So that's tip number 1.
Yeah. Number 2 is an international thing, and this certainly won't apply to everybody, but we did a project that has a massive international appeal. During our first Kickstarter, I didn't even charge additional shipping for many of the international rewards. When I got to the post office, I said, oops. Because to send anything out of the United States overseas is like a minimum of $20. So, you don't want to limit yourself, but if you're in a situation where you just can't afford to do international rewards, don't just do it because. I mean, make sure the finances are there. Don't feel bad that you have to charge that extra shipping internationally, because why lose money on it? And I also say that with an asterisk of the fact that I still charge I did charge international shipping on everything this time, but lost money on a lot of the things too, and did it intentionally and said we're going to cut our losses. So
good advice.
And number 3 is the old advice that, your parents say, don't do as I say, or don't do as I do as I say. Have a plan. We had no plan. My plan was my idea. It was what I wanted to do. It was where I wanted the documentary to go, but we had never had any clue where we wanted it to go. This second Kickstarter campaign was not part of the plan. It was something that we said, we have no more money. We have to do another Kickstarter. So you really need a roadmap.
Good tip. So let me just read those back.
He's pretty good at recapping.
This is.
I think this is your chief skill.
Kneecapping was that?
Kneecapping.
Yeah. If you get these tips wrong,
kneecapping
Jason,
and recapping.
I'll be coming around to your house with a shotgun.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. I'll try to nail them.
So we've got number 1. When it comes to rewards, the price is right. You're selling something, it's got to make sense. Number 2, got to watch out for shipping costs, especially internationally. And number 3, got to have a roadmap, have a plan. And since we've been talking to you, Jason, I've got a 4th one here. My 4th tip, based on talking to you, is do a crowdfunding campaign about Back to the Future.
Yeah, that worked.
It looks like that works every time.
Yeah.
So good tips, I think.
Looking back, or is there something that you're the most proud of regarding the project?
For me personally, it's a lot of the press. I mean, we were featured for the 2nd time this week in the Hollywood Reporter.
We saw that. That's fantastic.
Yeah. There's nothing bigger than that as a filmmaker. And even just being called a filmmaker in the Hollywood Reporter,
It's pretty sweet.
Yeah, it's a lot of the accolades. And, it's funny. I was talking to somebody randomly during the trip this week, and they said, take your time to enjoy it because there's a lot of stress at this point. It's making sure we're getting the edit done, and are we on schedule for color and sound and music. And, so when you have those opportunities, when you're standing up there on stage and you're doing that panel at Comic-Con, stop, breathe, take it in, and make sure that you enjoy it, because that's the drive. I mean, that's what gives you the drive to, that when this is over, to get back on the horse and do it again.
So can you tell us, what's the status of Back in Time right now?
We're on our 4th rough cut. We have literally just one more interview to shoot, and that's the interview with Huey Lewis next week. And there are 1 or 2 more that are sort of lingering. If they happen at the right time, they happen. If not, they don't. They're not key pieces of the story.
So do you go in with that Huey Lewis for the interview? Do you have one question that you're going to ask Huey Lewis?
There's probably several. There's sort of like the generic stuff, getting him to tell the story. That's what I like about interviewing. People say things that you're like, wow. And then you kind of take the next question from there. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Just like the story we got from Frank Price yesterday. All I needed from Frank Price was to just explain how he greenlit the writing of Back to the Future and then how he acquired it. That's it. What I ended up with was this, oh my God, story.
Yeah.
So for Huey, we're putting together a music element. We interviewed this great band called the Flux Capacitors. They're an 80s cover band out of LA yesterday.
Right.
And we've already interviewed Alan Silvestri, and Huey is sort of tying that knot between the score, the music from the film, and then how it's resonated today into the fact that you have this band out there that's literally doing Back to the Future covers, and they dress up as Back to the Future characters, putting those 3 elements together and telling that story.
Did you have a question that you needed from Michael J. Fox?
What it meant to him about how the fans support him, and the fact that he has Parkinson's, and how the way they support the Michael J. Fox Foundation. That element was crucial. The fact that he told us about his crazy schedule, shooting Family Ties and Back to the Future at the same time, that's great. It's in the movie. We needed it. It sets the stage. But again, this is a project. It's about people. It's about fans. And for the fans to be able to hear him talk about what it means to him, the way they support him, that was very important.
So we've got a section here as we begin to wrap up, Jason, called Mailbag. This is mail we've received either as tweets or direct to our site. This is a question from James Esdale. I hope I'm saying that right. James Esdale from London, who asks, Jason, out of these 3 things, which do you think is most likely to exist in 30 years' time? A, self-tying shoelaces. B, the 2-tie look. Well, actually, Pete, you've got the 2-tie look right now.
I never go anywhere without the 2-tie look.
And C, the flux capacitor.
So I'm going to have to go with the self-tying shoes only because of the inside information that we have that Nike's going to be producing them this year.
Ooh.
Are they really?
Yeah.
Cool.
Buy stock in Nike.
Yeah,
See, this show is not just crowdfunding tips; it's stock tips too.
Yeah, exactly.
And fashion, you know.
Yeah, and fashion.
Two ties, self-tying shoes. I mean, we got it all.
Pete looks very sharp in the two ties.
The two ties. It's a tricky look to pull off. I got to tell you, but
you've gotten teased, but you've weathered the storm.
Yeah, like permanently teased.
Well, thank you, James Esdale, for your question. It's time for guest picks. This is where our guest tells us about another crowdfunding campaign, past or present, that they think is cool.
So, Jason, what have you got for us?
So there's some in the past that are really cool that I could go with, but I happen to be currently funding one right now, so that's what I'm going to go with. It is called the EcoCube C. I happen to love fish. I used to have a huge saltwater fish tank when I had time to take care of it. But this is a little desktop fish tank, and essentially the filtration is done through hydroponics. So there's a plant that grows on the top of the tank, and I mean, I'd be terrible at explaining it, but it's on Kickstarter right now. It's called the EcoCube C. They are well funded. They've raised almost $340,000, over 5,000 backers, and they have some pretty cool stretch goals that they got going on right now. And it's their second Kickstarter. They had another EcoCube, I believe it was a year ago, maybe 2 years ago, and I had seen it at the time. I didn't back it. I was kind of on the fence, and this one apparently works out some issues that they had with the first one. So with all that said, very excited to get my hands on that, and maybe I'll be around long enough to enjoy it on my desk.
Yeah. I think I've seen that one. It is cool.
EcoCube. I'm actually a little bit worried about your fish. You said you were into fish when you had the time, but the past 2 years have been pretty busy.
Go feed your fish.
Are your
Jason.
fish okay?
They were donated back to the fish store.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I did not leave them to die. No, I had this great tank, and I had been working in New Jersey at the time, and I ended up bringing the tank to my father's office, and then he was babysitting it for me reluctantly, and then it had to go.
Okay, so everyone check out EcoCube C on Kickstarter.
Can you tell us about the launch of your film as you wrap up production? What's next?
So, like I said, we're editing right now. We're talking to massive amounts of different distribution options. So we don't have anything final there. What we do know is on October 21st, the film will premiere at We're Going Back, which is it's a fan festival celebrating the 30-year anniversary. It's going to take place on the Universal lot. So our film will screen that day. Beyond that, there's so much Back to the Future going on in October, and really from September to November. We might end up anywhere. So
it's going to be quite something for you to see it with a cinema full of fans for that on October 21st.
Yeah, I mean, Tribeca Film Festival is the closest thing to that so far for us. We were able to watch the movie, see our trailer in a theater of 1,000 people, wow, and see how good it looked projected. And that was just like that trailer was a preview to those people. That was a preview to us of what it's going to be like.
Were you able to enjoy it?
I mean, we were on stage, so we kind of had to get up from our chairs and move forward a little bit so we can kind of turn around and look at it. But I mean, that experience was amazing. And then we got to watch Back to the Future just in the audience, so that was pretty cool.
Jason, we'd like to send a Biff Tannen-sized thank you to you for all your great thoughts and your time and your stories. We're excited for you and for Back in Time. It's been a real pleasure having you on the show. My pleasure. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. And Jason, where can people go online to find out more about you and Back in Time?
You can visit our website, backintimefilm.com. We actually just added a section on there called Swag. So some of our Kickstarter awards, if you missed out on it, you can still get some of those things. It's very easy. Just pay through PayPal. And we're also on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and Back in Time Film on all three. So facebook.com/backintimefilm, and then it is our handle on the other two platforms.
And so I'm right in saying that people can actually purchase the film directly from your site, right?
Yes, they can right now still, yeah.
So we asked you before you came on the show, is there a quote that you have stuck on your studio wall or something that keeps you inspired, words to live by? Can you leave us with something? Yeah, it's something that Doc Brown himself, Christopher Lloyd, said to us during his interview, and it's something that he lives by: never leave any stone unturned. Nice.
Cool. You're certainly living up to that.
Well, it's kind of akin to what you said earlier about, ask, just ask.
There it is.
So, Jason, thank you once again for being such a fabulous guest. We wish you all the best as you finish off Back in Time. We can't wait to see it, and we hope it goes down a storm in October.
Yeah.
Thanks so much, guys. My pleasure being here.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Jason. So you've been listening to Crowd Scene, the show about successful crowdfunding campaigns and the people who make them happen. Our big thanks to our guest, Jason Aron, filmmaker and successful crowdfunder, for his time and insights in this episode. To find out more about Back in Time, go to backintimefilm.com. And to hear about upcoming guests on this show, please sign up to our newsletter at crowdsceneshow.com. If you like the show, please take a minute to post a review on iTunes. This helps us reach more listeners. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to Crowd Scene on iTunes or any other podcast app. Pete and I want to say thank you as always to singer-songwriter Kim Bookbinder for the theme music for Crowd Scene. To find out more about Kim, please check out kimbookbinder.com. Special thanks to our friend Jim Fowler and his expert ears. For more on Jim, visit jimfowlermusic.com. So until next time, thanks for listening.
Crowd scene, gonna kick it with Pete and Mike. Crowd scene, interviews behind the hype. Crowd scene, crowd scene. What do you do? What do you say to make crowdfunding go your way? Crowd scene, crowd scene. Crowd scene, crowd scene, crowd scene. Your shake brings all the backers to the yard.
Now that's what I call epic.